So good morning to the class. Welcome back. And today, since we have 2 hour session, we will have a mix of the completion of the theory as well as the exercise or assignment wherein you can try hands-on to build the questionnaire. All right, because subsequent to this, we are going to proceed into unit 5, wherein you are going to look at the, one second, we will have a look at the the analytical techniques and all of that. So the number of categories in a scale determine whether it is balanced or unbalanced, in the sense that if there are equal number of the positive options and the negative options in a scale, set of answer options are equal in terms of the positive sentiment and the negative, we are calling that as a balanced scale. And if it is unbalanced, that means the number of items are not equally split, but it will have a little bit of skewness more towards a possible sentiment. For example, on the right hand side, what you see is that unbalanced scale, Jovan mask for men, is we have 4 good options, good sentiments to be expressed out of 6, whereas there are only 2 options for the negative sentiment. So extremely good, very good, good, and somewhat good. These are the 4 items expressing or giving the option to the respondent to express about whether they like the brand. And there are only 2 options of the negative sentiment, bad and very bad. So in case you have unbalanced scale typically would give more options for people to choose from the from one type of an sentiment, and typically it will be something in favor of the question. The other kind of scale configurations which are there are a combination of using pictures and boxes, and there is also kind of thermometer scales, especially when you want to have a graphical option given to respondents to answer, and where perhaps it can also be administered to children in terms of the smiling face, wherein you ask people or you ask some respondents who may not be able to perhaps comprehend very complicated sentences. So there we can use smiling faces. And I think, do you recall students, when before the pandemic or while we are allowed to go to retail outlets and all that, do you remember where smileys have been used for feedback? Can you please put it in the chat box? Can you recall there are some places where these smileys are actually used as feedback option? And any of you can remember? Of course, I'll give you some examples where it has been used. Yeah, Sudarshan, where is it? So some of you are expressing yes. What I'm saying is using graphical smileys or frown, the face emoji, to elicit opinion from people about some feedback. Do you recall? Have you ever seen this before? Some of you have seen it. Yeah, Reliance Fresh in the billing section. Indeed, yes, Chandan, Pranita, Sudarshan, yes, gift shop feedback. True. And has any of you have gone to this Decathlon outlet to buy stuff, garments, all of that? Have you seen that they have big smileys there, and they ask you literally that while you're billing that, please press this? Have you ever seen that? So that is also a way of using the graphical emoji to kind of elicit feedback, where you don't really need people to, read complicated sentences, or in fact any sentence for that matter. And they can just express whether they have liked the experience or not liked the experience, right? Very good. So these are the ways in which you can develop it. Now, there is also a theoretical process of developing a multi-item scale. What is a multi-item scale? Multi-item scale would mean wherein you are having multiple sentences to express or to get the feedback of people towards a particular attitude or preference. You remember Ohio lottery case? Ohio lottery case had used several sentences. You remember? So when you have such a, the set of items to be used for understanding something, for delivering some kind of an outlook towards a product or a service or towards any kind of object, and you want people to read or to express in many kind of ways, you can use attitudinal statements, opinion related items. So when you do that, how do you really develop such a multi-item scale? So what you see on the screen here is that, one second, what you see on the screen is the step to develop a multi-item scale. So basically you should have the theory beforehand. So it could be a customer satisfaction theory, or a brand loyalty theory, or employee motivation theory in general. Sorry. All right. So there should be a theory behind that. And what is a theory basically? Can any of you put in the chat box, what is theory? What's a theory? Just give me some example of theory. What is a theory? Because we have discussed all this as part of the basic things of research, that is constructs, concepts, variable, theories, models, right? So when you talk about theory in general, is theory important for research? Can I have the answers in the chat box? Is theory important when you are doing business research? Is theory pertaining to customer relationship important if you're doing a customer relationship based theory? Is retail management theory important if you want to do a business research for a retail business? Is business to business marketing theory important when you're doing business research for businesses? Yeah, so yes, so Sudarshan is saying that yes, theory is important because it defines the process. So what is theory actually made of? Google it and find out. You can also do that. But what is it? What is theory going to contain? What will theory provide you? Is theory going to help us? Because see, in the development of a multi-item scale, what will happen is the theory will set down certain set of concepts, certain definitions, certain propositions in that area, certain kind of understanding, certain kind of phenomenal understanding. So it will provide you, yes, some of the idea about the body of knowledge in that particular domain. And so what you do with the theory is that gives you a basic understanding. From that theory, then you need to develop the initial pool of items or statements based on which you can actually start building up the kind of requirement for input of your opinions or any kind of thing that you want to examine. For example, if you want to measure loyalty, loyalty is a concept, is a theory which has propositions on two aspects. One is the emotional aspect of attachment to a brand, as well as a behavioral aspect of purchase of a brand. So normally when we talk about any loyalty, see, loyalty basically is a concept drawn from the social sciences domain and basically from the sociological domain. All right, so being faithful to a partner and all of that concept has been borrowed into the marketing or into the social sciences field for, say, employee loyalty towards a company, a brand loyalty, wherein customers are purchasing a brand. And in that aspect, it has been studied and it has been found that loyalty towards any kind of product or a brand is primarily determinant of two outcomes. One is emotional attachment to the brand, and second is the behavioral aspect of expression, wherein a person will typically buy and rebuy the same brand irrespective of choices in the market and irrespective of the influences in the market which can cause switching behavior. All right, so if a multi-item scale has to be developed for checking loyalty, the theory itself says that you must have items to measure whether they have purchased, what kind of brands have they purchased before, what kind of brands are they purchasing now. If the brands are going to be the same, that means there is loyalty. But only repurchasing of a brand is not a sufficient condition for loyalty. So the other thing which theory provides for that domain is that you should also check whether there is attitudinal affinity towards the brand, whether there is an emotional connect with the brand, whether there's an emotional affinity to the brand. Two, is the person liking the brand? Does the person love the brand? So in that case, several aspects of the theory also comes in from the body of knowledge. What is the other thing? That it should not be a case that people are just rebuying a brand only because it is available. Okay, now to what extent will people substitute their original favored brand? If it is something low risk item, for example, salt, sugar and all that, people mostly buy any brand which is available in the market. But if it is considering some kind of a product which has a risk item, supposing electronic product where it has a brand aspect to it, or you're talking about shampoos and all that, which has a risk factor. If you don't choose the right shampoo, people are scared that their hair will fall and all that. So in cases where the brands and the products have some kind of a risk attached to the usage, people tend to choose and stick to the brand that they feel they are comfortable with. All right, and for low risk item, mostly, even if that particular brand is not available and similar such brands are available which more or less fulfills a kind of benefit that any other brand is providing, like I said, for example, salt or sugar and all that, people normally, even if they're not finding their preferred brand in a particular retail outlet, they choose to substitute. Now in case of substitution, what happens? Supposing I buy Tata salt And now tomorrow I go to the grocery store, I don't get Tata salt, and I say it's okay, Annapurna salt is fine enough, let me buy that. How does it matter? So what is happening is the moment I'm switching from Tata salt to Annapurna salt, will you say that I'm brand loyal? Are you going to say that I'm brand loyal? I bought a different brand. Will you say? You will not say. You will say that no, last time you bought Tata Salt and now you're buying a different brand. So therefore you're not brand loyal. Now, why did I not be a brand loyal customer? Because I did not find my chosen brand. Same situation. Let me just explain it a little bit more. Supposing I bought now Annapurna salt, and next time when I have to buy salt for the house, I go to the store and I don't find Tata salt. All right. Now I ask for Tata salt, but they don't have it. They say it's only Annapurna. And so I rebuy Annapurna salt because it is there. Now, will you say that I'm brand loyal? Now, remember, attitudinally, I like and I favor Tata Salt, but somehow I'm not getting the brand in the market. And for me, I'm not willing to make that kind of effort to go out to some other shop to buy that particular brand of salt. So in this case, what happens? In this case, now in the second situation, if you capture the data, you will say, well, madam, what brand of salt are you buying now? I said Annapurna salt. Very good. What brand of salt did you buy earlier? I bought Annapurna salt. Okay, so then you will make the connection. Okay, she bought Annapurna salt earlier also. Now also she's buying it. So she's buying the same brand. She's brand loyal. But actually, if you don't take the attitudinal item, that is where when you build this multi-item scales for research questions, and if you're measuring something like loyalty, the theory must be there when you're making the questions. So your question, if you're going to study something like loyalty, must not include only questions which are asking about the current purchase and the last purchase, but you also should ask, like, what brand of salts can I think of? What brand of salts do I like? What brands of salt would I love to have? Or which are the brands I'm really attached to? Then you will find out perhaps that, okay, which is the brand that I like? Tata Salt. But then, madam, why are you not buying Tata Salt? Because I'm not getting it in the nearest retail store. So what is happening? Attitudinally, I like it, but because the brand is not distributed in the nearest retail store close to me, a customer like me is not able to buy that. Now, what is the implication for the domain of marketing for this? The domain of marketing will say that, well, people do have a positive attitude towards Tata Salt, but maybe distribution coverage is not sufficient. Therefore, what is happening is people are buying some other brand, right? So there is a possibility that you might like a brand, but then it doesn't give any kind of sales revenue to the particular company. So what happens is when you do research, the theory is very important to ensure that you can exactly cover all that is required to understand a phenomenon in the management field, especially management. As I told you, it is mostly with the social sciences domain with certain technicalities put in. Supposing you are studying something in finance, something in HR, something in marketing, something in production, every kind of business research problem will have some kind of discipline. Okay, it could involve certain amount of psychological aspects, sociological aspect, your management related technical aspects, and you need to understand the theory in order to develop the items, the statements, the questions that are required to fully explore the phenomenon which is supposed to be understood, based on which the research will collect the data, and you will analyze the data whether it is qualitative or quantitative, and the analysis must lead to interpretations which is going to provide some insight which can help in reducing the uncertainty to the decision maker and help the decision maker to make some optimum level of efficient decision making. All right, so theory is important. That will help you to understand what are the initial set of items that you require, collect those details from secondary data, do some exploratory research and find out what kind of items you can put in. The third step would be to select the reduced set of items based on the qualitative judgment. So what did you see in the Ohio lottery case? That there were so many statements. Now, is it required? Perhaps it is required, but maybe you need to understand that there should be a limitation to the number of items in your questionnaire. Otherwise, your questionnaire will become very lengthy, or you ask too many things to a respondent. The respondent might find it very inconvenient, uncomfortable, not very suitable to answer so many questions. So it's getting confused, what am I revealing or not revealing, that kind of a thing. So you should be able to reduce the set of items to a number or to a set of items that is going to explore what you really want to find out, without ensuring that you don't create too much of clutter. All right, then you need to collect the data from a pre-test sample, which means once you make the set of items, administer it to a sample of people who are similar in characteristic to the main population of interest of your study. So if you want to administer it to 1,000 people, the main questionnaire or with a set of items, instead of going with the questionnaire right away to the 1,000 people, develop the draft questionnaire and give it to, say, for example, 30-35 people similar to that kind of a sample population, and try and see, pre-test it, meaning testing it before you administer it to the general, the actual population of interest, or before launching into the main survey. Now, what is the purpose of doing a pre-test? You find out whether the statements are getting understood or not, whether the words are being understood or not, whether people are able to understand how to, read the question and then answer the options. You also get feedback from the respondents in the pre-testing stage, whether there are any kind of bugs in the questionnaire. Is it getting too difficult to answer? For example, if you administer e-questionnaires, you need to find out whether the questions are coming properly or not. Are people able to fill up and submit the questionnaires correctly? So you kind of understand all of that. And after you collect all this information about how the questionnaire or the set of questions is, you can go to the next stage, which is the statistical analysis. What is statistical analysis? You have collected the questionnaire from a pre-test sample and you've got some data, some exemplary data. You can take that data, put it into an Excel sheet and put it into a software and start doing some kind of analysis, which is a kind of an analytical plan that you have, that if I'm going to administer these kind of questions to the main survey, what kind of analysis am I going to do? So nominal scale, measurement items will be subject to some kind of chi-square techniques and all, mix of nominal scale, interval scale, ratio scale. You can subject it to ANOVA, you can subject it to regression. Interval scale items only or quantitative data only can be subject to regression, correlation. All right, and then you decide whether you want to do a factor analysis, cluster analysis. So all of these things you can try and see whether the items that you made in your questionnaire, and once you get a pre-testing done, from the pre-testing whatever data is coming out, you can do a small kind of a pilot analysis based on that. All right, and based on that, what you can do is you can find the reliability of the scale, Cronbach's alpha. We will discuss that later. Find out what is the level of the Cronbach's alpha, that is the reliability score of the scale. And based on that, you decide whether you have to increase the items or increase or decrease the items in the questionnaire, whether you should modify the type of items, all of that. And then what you do is, if required, you collect more data from a different sample, so that you tend to check that, okay, this kind of scales are actually valid. And then you evaluate the reliability and validity and the generalizability. Reliability would mean that when you administer the scale, repeat the measurement, is it giving you the same kind of results or not? If it is not, then that the scale is not reliable. If you remember here, do you remember the example in the class we discussed, that when you are going to measure, say, the body weight of a person, you said that we need to use weighing scale, right? Now we said, what is the validity of the scale? Weighing scale is normally used to measure weight of a person. But when I gave the example of measuring the length of a bookmark, all right, or the length of a pen, for example, I have a pen in my hand. If I want to measure the length of this pen, would I use a weighing scale or would I use a ruler? I would use a ruler. That is what all of you had mentioned. So using a ruler scale or a measuring tape is a valid measuring instrument for measuring the length of a pen. But if I'm going to measure the body weight of a person, I have to use weighing scale, which is a valid measuring instrument. Now, what is reliability? Reliability is that when repeated measurements are made of the same item, it should not give different results, of course, given the fact that the situation should remain the same and the time period and all of that. So we took the example of taking the body weight of a person. So we said that supposing a person gets on a weighing scale right now, the body weight reading is 60 kgs. He gets down, or he or she gets down from the scale, waits for 2-3 minutes, and then goes back on the scale. Now, if the scale is going to read and give a reading of 100 kgs, would you say that the scale is reliable? Just waited for 2-3 minutes, right? Third case, the person gets down from the scale, again waits for 2-3 minutes, and then goes back on the scale again. Now the same scale is now going to read, say, 70 kgs. Okay, now, so how many readings we had? We had 60 kgs as the first reading, second reading, 100 kgs, third reading, 60 kgs, 100 kgs, and 70 kgs. Same scale, same person, gap of 2-3 minutes, but it is giving variedly different readings. Would you say that the scale is accurate? Would you say that the scale is accurate? Is it possible that a person can have a variation of 10 kgs, 30, 40 kgs in like 2 minutes? No, right? Right, very good. Thank you for the answers. It is not possible, right? So that means what is possibly going wrong? What is going wrong in this case? First time getting up on the scale, 60 kgs. 2 minutes later, you get on the scale again. It is giving 100 kgs. Get down and get up in another 2-3 minutes. It is showing 70 kgs. So what do you think is the problem? Is it the problem with the body weight of the person, or is there something wrong in the scale? Yeah, scale is incorrect. Thank you so much. The scale is incorrect. What is happening to the scale? The scale is giving different readings. Given the condition, it is giving different readings. So obviously, can you rely on the scale reading? Would you rely on it? Would you be confident about the scale measurement that it is showing? Would you, if you were the person, okay, 60 kgs, 100 kgs, 70 kgs, I can imagine the kind of mental state of the person who's going through that, first time you read, okay, 60 kg, 70 kgs, you wanted to take a reconfirmation and it shows 100 kgs. Then you get back and then you want to recheck it and then it says 70 kgs. I think by now you would start to get a little bit convinced that no, there is no problem in my weight. There is something problem in the machine itself. So this is an example where the scale reading is unreliable. The scale, that body measurement scale, the weight measuring scale, in this case is unreliable because it is not giving the consistent reading. What would have been a reliable scale? The reliable scale would be the person gets up on the scale and assuming that the body weight is indeed 60 kgs, it shows 60 kgs. Even if the person gets down from the scale and goes up on the scale, okay, in another 2-3 minutes or whatever, 5 minutes. Of course, in 5 minutes, you can understand it is not going to be possible that somebody will gain too much of weight, right? So 60 kgs person, if the person is going to go back on the scale and now if it is showing 60 kgs, would you say that the scale is reliable? Gets back from the scale, third time goes on the scale and it is still 60 kgs. Would you say that it is correct? Would you say that it is correct? All 3 times it shows 60 kgs. Is it correct? If the calibration is rightly done and it shows the same measurement, it is reliable. But what if somebody's weight is actually 50 kgs, but the measurement scale shows 60 kgs? In that case, is it reliable? So in order to check the reliability, you might have to check the body weight of the person on 2 different machines or on different sets of machines to find out what is the actual body weight of the person. Now, if the body weight of the person actually comes to a certain number, say 60 kgs, right? And he or she gets on any kind of correctly calibrated, now mind my words, correctly calibrated scale, which is expected to give the correct reading, correctly measured, whatever it is supposed to measure, right? Weighing scale is supposed to measure the body weight or the weight of something. All right, with a ruler scale, you measure the length or breadth of something, right? So if you're using a valid scale and it is correctly calibrated to measure what it is supposed to measure, and each time that the measurement is repeated, given the conditions that are supposed to remain constant, then if the measurements are going to be same once the retesting is done, we talk about such a scale as being reliable. All right, so when you collect any data, be it research, be it any kind of general case also, when you are collecting any data, the scale that you use must be what? Both reliable and valid. All right. Now, once you do this, you must also be able to understand that the validity and reliability of the scale measurement, okay, must also be generalizable to the population. Means whatever you carry out research in terms of data collection from a set of respondents in a sample, the sample characteristics or the sample must be chosen, as we said in the sampling class, it must be chosen in such a way that the sample characteristics reflect the characteristics of the population. So it is something which will be representative of the population. So when your sample is going to be representative of the population, in whichever manner you collect the sample. So the ideal way to collect such a sample would be to conduct it in a probabilistic manner, probabilistic sampling. So if you have a sample which is representative of the population, which means characteristic wise and numbers and all that wise, so the proportion and all that, so then the measurements that you do on the sample must be generalizable. You can infer certain things based on the sample statistics. You can infer something about the population parameters, and that is the entire purpose of doing the statistical analysis. The measurements of a sample is called statistics. Measurement of elements in the population is parameter. Now, when you cannot do a census, you cannot study the entire population, that's when you're taking a sample. So the sample characteristics must be such that once you do a study based on a sample, it must be able to, you must be able to say that, yes, whatever I have studied in the sample is similar if we were to do the study in the population. So scale measurements must be reliable, valid, and it should be generalizable. And such type of scales that we take should be the final scale that can be used. All right. So this is how you develop a multi-item scale. So when you are evaluating the scale, please keep in mind, now you can see on the screen, scales must have certain criteria. One criteria is reliability. And how to test the reliability? You can do a testing and retesting to see whether the scale is reliable, giving the repeated measurements should yield the same kind of outcomes. You can also test alternative forms of the items, especially if you're developing it in terms of the items in the questionnaire. You can see whether similar set of sentences can be made and they actually take the same answers. You need to also check for internal consistency by statistically, we talk about reliability coefficient, Cronbach's alpha, which is a reliability coefficient score. If you subject the answers from these scale items into the statistical software, typically SPSS is what we use, statistical package for social sciences. When you do that, the reliability coefficient comes out. The reliability coefficient varies between 0 to 1, and any score which is above, when the reliability coefficient is higher than 0.7, is when we say that a scale set of items is actually reliable. Now, internally, there is a way in which you can also inflate the reliability score by increasing the number of items. So the more scale items you give, the reliability score is likely to increase. All right. So when you check any research, we also try to check whether people have unnecessarily, built in many number of items in a scale in order to get their higher reliability score. So if a scale is consisting of 10 items, 10 items to which it is either strongly disagree to strongly agree or highly satisfied to satisfied, any kind of satisfaction scale, motivation scale, the repurchase intention scale, agree disagree scale. So many a times what some of the researchers tend to do is that they tend to add on many number of items in order to increase the Cronbach's coefficient. So Cronbach coefficient, which I told you, varies between 0 to 1. 0 to 1, which means it will take values like 0, 0 0.05, 0 0.1, 0 0.2, 3, like that. It will go on, and the final value is 1. And any value which is higher than 0.7 and above, so anything between 0.7 onwards, not 1 exactly. So anything higher than 0.7, reliability score, that is Cronbach's alpha, is generally considered to indicate that the scale items are actually reliable. However, many textbooks, for your information, many textbooks do also mention that Cronbach's alpha, if it is higher than 0.6, is going to indicate reliability coefficient, reliability score for the scale. But for most of the researchers in the research domain, we normally will take Cronbach's alpha value to be more than 0.7 in order to indicate that the scale is reliable, which also means that Cronbach's alpha value of less than 0.7, all right, indicates a less reliable scale. But what is the trick? The trick is you should not use unnecessary items in order to inflate the Cronbach's alpha value. Now we will look into that, how we should not do that a little later when we make the questions, so that you don't make excess questions, because that will cause unnecessary fatigue and can cause data collection, quality errors, and the type of answers also, response errors can arise. Now, going back to the scale evaluation, what else do we need to remember? We need to remember the scale evaluation. One aspect is reliability, which we saw, test and retest option. You can have alternative forms, you can have internal consistency. What is the other aspect? The other aspect is validity of a scale. What is validity of a scale? Use the correct scale to measure what it is supposed to measure. All right. So in examples, we said, when you're going to measure loyalty of, customers or employees, you should see not only that they are sticking to the same brand, but also see how whether attitudinally or emotionally, they are also liking the brand, attached to the brand, love the brand. All right, so it is not only about whether they purchase, which brand did they purchase now and what did they purchase last, not only about the purchase behavior, but also the attitudinal. So you need to understand what kind of content, what kind of items should go into such scale. So you should have attitudinal scales, you should have items that measure opinion of people, you should have items which ask people what did they purchase now, if you are going to study something about loyalty. So if you're going to study something about loyalty, the scales that you're going to measure the details about loyalty of people towards some object, it must have the relevant contents. All right, and it should also have criterion validity, means it should be able to predict something at the end of the day. And the construct, the set of construct, meaning the set of items that make up the scale, should be such that it is drawn from theory, it is drawn from the subject, it is drawn from the domain, and it must have certain things such that once people are responding towards certain things, for example, repurchasing, if people are answering to a question about repurchase and they say yes, they have repurchased, that means it is converging towards the fact that there is a loyalty aspect. But there should also be something else, that if you ask a question and they show that no, they are not purchasing something, it should be, you should be able to discriminate between the answers as well. And there should be a kind of the meaningfulness in the entire process, and that is what we talk about the construct validity. All right, so convergent validity, discriminant, and the nomological validity. What does it mean to people? So when you're asking questions about affinity of a person towards a brand, either the brand of their organization or their company or the product that they use, so do they like it, do they love it, are they attached to it? Different things have different meanings. All right, and the last item of the scale evaluation is about generalizability. So what is generalizability? I said generalizability would be the statistical inference part of it, that whatever you have made as an outcome, you've done the study based on a sample. Does the sample statistics, can you infer that there is a similarity in what you have studied in the sample is what is prevailing in the population? All right, so these three are very, very important. What you now see on the screen is a measurement accuracy model, which is the true score model. True score model, which you see is, say, x sub 0 is equal to x sub t plus x sub s and x sub r. What is x sub 0? That is the observed score or measurement. So the true score that is there, what is being observed can be a measurement which you are seeing is additional to the true score which is prevailing because of certain things on the right side of the equation. So what is the equation here? What you are observing and what you are measuring is a component of the true score of the characteristic plus some kind of a systematic error which is prevailing and some kind of a random error. Systematic error typically will be elements which is affecting the measurement in a certain way consistently, and random error would be something which is affecting the measurement situation in a very random manner. All right, so normally what happens is whatever you're measuring, supposing you're asking people to talk about, express their attitude towards something, whether they agree, disagree, something, like, dislike something, prefer, don't prefer something, what is the kind of feeling that they have towards something, is it good or bad, using semantic differential scale and all of that. So what happens is you will normally have some kind of a contamination of the actual data that is being revealed. For example, even for us also, if you talk about the measurement of the weight, body weight, the actual body weight is not only what you are seeing, which is the 60 kgs, it's also a mix of all the atmospheric air and everything that is around us, right? That also impacts the kind of a weight measurement. But when you go and measure the body weight of a person on moon, what is going to be the weight of a body of a person on weight of a person on the moon? Is it going to be the same as that on Earth? What is going to affect? Is there going to be some kind of effect, system which will affect the measurement? What is the characteristic on Earth? There's a gravitational force. On moon, do you have gravitational force impacting? Will that affect the weight? So similar things are there. So if you're going to measure something on the moon or something on the Earth, there will be some systematic influences which will act on the measurement, and there will be certain random. Yeah. So so gravity's effect on the Earth causes an impact on the weight that you really talk about. That is why in science there's a difference between the measurement of mass and the measurement of weight. All right, so measurements always should ensure that you don't have any kind of random error skipping in. So you can have, specific set of errors, like people you administer the scale to, depending on the socio-economic level, depending on the intellectual level, they will understand certain things. All right, and there will be certain kind of economic conditions based on which people are answering something. So if you give a set of questions to people today during the pandemic, there's a certain attitude that is prevailing, there's a certain kind of mindset that is prevailing, certain kind of health and economic concerns that is there in people's mind. So it's a systematic kind of error which will be part of the true measurement score. So what is going to be the actual measurement? It will have a kind of a systematic error built in. But random errors could be something like you ask something and then somebody says, okay, I didn't understand the question at all. Now the language proficiency, if you're going to administer it in different language, perhaps that can give a different kind of an error input. All right. So when you talk about measurements, you have to ensure that there are less kind of error possibility creeping into the measurement, so that you can get as true a score of measurement as possible. So the ideal situation would be if the observed score is actually the same as the true score. Now the ideal situation cannot be there. There will be some amount of systematic error which will be there, and there will be some amount of random error. Purpose will be to reduce the random error and just deal with the systematic error as it goes. All right, so some of the potential sources of error on measurement are given on the screen right now. So some of the stable characteristics, for example, intelligence, social desirability, education, like I said, these are some of the stable characteristics which influence test score. Certain short-term factors or transient factors, factors which are just moving, would be health, emotions, fatigue, that can affect people's responses. So if you administer a set of items when the person is really very, very energetic, like for example, if I'm going to give a lecture first thing in the morning, you would be more, attentive to listen because you're at least, the mind is fresh. But if I'm going to give the same thing at 6 o'clock in the evening, I say I want to take a class at 6 o'clock in the evening, or 8 o'clock in the night, I want to take a class and I want to give a lecture for 2 hours. Just imagine 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the night. Will anybody be in that kind of a mental state to listen to me? It's not going to be possible. So there would be certain transient personal factors which can influence. All right. Then there could be situational factors like presence of other people, noise, distraction. You're administering a questionnaire, you're asking certain sensitive question, and the person is having to answer that, and he doesn't know whether the interviewer is going to look at the answers and have some kind of opinion. He is not, or she is not aware, he is not very comfortable answering those questions in front of others. All of these are things. All right. Then the other could be sampling of items. You want to add, delete, or change certain items in the scale. That could also cause a measurement. So you must have, once you finalize on the scale items, you should administer that scale to all the respondents and not have one type of scale to one set of respondent and one set of items to the other set of respondents. All right. And when the options are given, so even if there is a translation of the questionnaire, the answer options, whenever you have a closed set of question, of course, the wording and all that will involve the translation process. I told you the back translation. If you want to translate something from English to, say, for example, Kannada or Hindi, so you must be able to translate that questionnaire through the help of a language expert. All right. So first English to Kannada, for example, the local language of the state of Karnataka. So you will need to have a person who is fluent both in Kannada and English. So once you give the questionnaire, assuming that the researcher himself or herself is not very proficient in the other language, the method of doing the translation is as follows. So how do you do that? You ensure that you take the English questionnaire, give it to a language expert who is fluent in both the languages at least, that is, which is both the language, the original language in which the questionnaire is, which is English, to the second language, the intended language of translation. So you want to translate it in Kannada. So there should be this person who should be fluent both in English and in Kannada, because the person has to read the English questionnaire and be able to understand how the language or what kind of wordings have to be used when translating the same questionnaire into Kannada without losing the meaning and the relevance and the consistency. All right. So the Kannada question is made. Now, assuming that the researcher or his or her unit does not understand Kannada, how does he or she know that the Kannada questionnaire is the same as the English questionnaire in terms of the meaning, spirit, content, consistency? So that is why it is not going to be based only on true faith of the translator in between, the first translator, but scientifically, because research is a very scientific process, we will involve a second translator who will again be both. Now, what is the purpose of the second translation? The researcher or the researching organization must see that the Kannada question is actually, the Kannada questionnaire is actually similar to the original version questionnaire in English. There should not be any kind of misinterpretation. What will happen if there is any kind of misinterpretation, different kinds of meaning in the question? It will lead to, it is a source of error. It will lead to response error. It will lead to measurement error. So what does a researching organization need to do? And this is part of research ethics. The second translator has to be involved. Who's the second translator? A translator who's going to be proficient both in Kannada and English once again, but this translator is going to be a different entity, different person than the first one. You're not going to involve the first person because they will be biased when they will translate it back. So in order to ensure objectivity in your translation process of that questionnaire, you will have to use a second translator proficient in both Kannada and English, because now you want that person to read the Kannada questionnaire that was made by the first translator, read that and retranslate it back into English. So when the person has to retranslate back the questionnaire into English, the person must necessarily be proficient also in the language of English. So that is why the second translator must be fluent both in the Kannada language as well as English language. When this retranslation happens back, the researchers or the researching organization or the team is able to exactly compare their initial English questionnaire with the retranslated questionnaire to see if there is any kind of difference or how similar are they both. They both meaning these two questionnaires are. Why do you want to now see that? Why do you want to see whether it is similar or not? So that you can retain that Kannada questionnaire. So once the researcher and the team is able to see, all right, that their initial English questionnaire translated into Kannada questionnaire is actually containing the same set of meanings, intent, content, consistency of questions and measuring. Of items included in this scale, there should not have been any addition, deletion, or changes in the scale item that may have unintentionally creeped in by the language translator. All right. So in order to keep that systematic focus, in order to keep the objective focus, we don't have any bias towards anybody. We don't have any kind of emotion or anything towards anybody, partiality or anything. We want to see whether our instrument, if it is in English, is going to be measuring the same things or is able to be conveyed to the respondents, whether the respondent understands English or any other language. I should be able to deliver the measurement instrument to that person and collect their data irrespective of any constraints like language. All right. So we ensure that this kind of thing happens in order to avoid potential sources of error or measurement. Fifth point, lack of clarity of the scale, including the instructions and items themselves. That is why exactly, even if you have a single questionnaire that the researcher has developed in a language, and you need to have, for example, if you have to do the survey globally, so many languages are involved, right? Reduce the focus. Even if you have to do this, do a study across India, you cannot possibly do a study across India taking into account that I am only going to do a questionnaire only in English. It is not possible. If you are only going to force fit a questionnaire in English language and administer it to people around the country, you are liable to get errors because not everybody is going to understand English the way you want them to or the way they should be understanding. So even English language comprehensibility cannot be uniform even across people who claim to understand English also. All right. So there should be clarity on every item, including the wordings and syntax. Sixth factor, mechanical factors like poor printing, overcrowding of items in the questionnaire, and poor design. So all of these things should be seen. It should not be cluttered and all of that. Administering of the scale, differences among interviewers. Same thing, like respondents are different, even interviewers are different. So you must ensure that if you're administering a questionnaire, not a schedule, questionnaire which respondents are expected to answer. Don't leave too many doubts, areas for doubts and clarifications that the respondent needs to take from the interviewer. Because again, interviewers can be different. Why? Because the researcher who's conducting the research may not necessarily be the interviewer always. One person cannot be in multiple locations at the same time, can they? Right? So you may have to understand and appreciate the fact that a researcher may have to use separate people, separate entities to act as interviewers who will interface with people to get the responses back. And if that interviewer is not able to clarify or is going to give a different kind of interpretation to the questions, or when clarification is sought by the respondent, what will happen? If you remember, the sources of error, which I had taught in a previous class long back, it was this one of the sources of error happens to be interviewer error. The way the interviewer collects the responses, whether they cheat on the recording of the responses or whether they're not collecting the correct data and all that. So interviewers should not pose to be a source of error also. All right, so there should be that kind of clarity. How do you handle that? Researchers must ensure that interviewers who will be involved in the study must necessarily be appropriately trained to handle and administer the survey. All right. Analysis, last point, the 8th point, analysis factors like scoring and statistical analysis. Use it appropriately so that there is no source of error on the measurement. All right. So when we look at multivariate analysis, all of that I will show you. For example, chi-square has certain limitation, factor analysis has certain limitations, correlation regression has some limitation, discriminant analysis has certain limitations. So you must ensure that these factors should not add to or should not contribute to the error, or the data that is going to be used must be appropriately relevant for a particular type of analysis. All right, so the rest of the content here would be about reliability, retest and all of that, alternative forms. You can go through that, whatever I have discussed. The split half, coefficient alpha, Cronbach's alpha, all of that is given here. Validity of the scale, content and criterion validity, all of that is given here. All right, reliability factors, all of that. So this summarily concludes details about our comparative scaling. All right, so which is to use we use details, that is to know details about how to use a scale, or what are the things that you should remember in using a scale. Last but not the least, for the first half of the class today, so we will take a break around 10 o'clock for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will resume back to do an exercise in questionnaire making. Now before that, we have about 10 minutes right now in which we will cover the rest of the portion that we had to do for being prepared to conduct the assignment. That is, we have a 2-hour class, students. So we have completed 1 hour right now, and we have 1 more hour to go. So in that 1 hour, that is after we resume the class around 10:05 or 10:07, 10:07, we will do a practical hands-on exercise. All right. Now, in order to do the practical hands-on exercise, what is it that we need to do? We have to be equipped with the theory appropriately. So what is a theory that I want you to now kind of get yourself, acquainted with? I wanted to show this. What you see on the screen right now are the recap of the process of using these measurement scales to design questionnaires. So what you are going to do after we resume from the break today till about 11 o'clock is you will design certain sets of questions depending on a research problem. Again, it's going to be a hands-on exercise you will do with your teams, and you will design the set of questionnaire with different set of questions. All right, ensuring that you don't commit certain basic mistakes that we have seen that can be committed when making a questionnaire in the wrong manner. So you will do that, and then you will try and make that into an e-form that is using SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. Right now, I'll show a little bit. So a little bit of quick recap on the items that you are seeing on the screen. So this is ensure that you don't ask too many questions. One second. You don't ask too many questions, double barrel questions. So when you are making the assignment right now, what you will do when you're developing the question, what should you ensure? You should ensure that you don't ask two things in one question, ask 2 different questions, and don't ensure that you confuse the question to the respondent. Next is try to give options and don't ask too much of things which people may not be able to remember. Next is try to have open-ended questions in very, very limited form, because open-ended questions can have problems in terms of analysis. All right. Next is you need to understand the structured question, which is providing alternatives. So what kind of alternatives are you going to provide? You're going to provide the alternatives that is going to be used by the customers or the respondents. What is dichotomous question? Where you are having two sets of questions that can be given, or you can choose questions which can have scaled alternatives, right? So you can have 5-item scale, 7-item scale, and you can do it basis the requirement. The other thing that you need to remember is do not use words or terms which are very difficult or very confusing for people to understand. So what should you keep in mind? Who is it that you are going to ask? What is it that you're going to ask? When are you going to administer it, and where? So that you understand how people can generally use the questionnaire in a manner in which you don't get any kind of erroneous answers. Now, having understood that, remember that there are nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval, and ratio scale that you can use. So nominal scale basically is categories, ordinal is for ranking. Interval scales you can use, which is basically the ones that you have all remembered from the other class yesterday. You can have different kinds of interval scales like Likert scale, semantic differential scale, staple scale. Right? You can also use some of the questions in a questionnaire, which can be from what you see on the screen right now, which is actually comparative scale. You can have paired comparison, rank order, constant sum. You don't need to use Q-sort right now, which is beyond this syllabus course as of now. Non-comparative scales you can use, preferably the itemized rating scale, which is Likert scale, 5-point scale, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. You can also use semantic differential scale. If you remember, semantic differential scale, it's a 7-point scale with bipolar opposites, right? So I had shown that. And then of course you can use the staple scale as well. So staple scale is again a 10-point scale with a statement in between and 5 positive aspects on either side of the statement. And you can use that and develop questions. When you are developing the questions, you need to see that mostly if there is a balanced scale, it is better, because then people have the options to answer with equal number of options given. Graphical presentation of the questions can also be done. You can also use smileys wherever required, depending on the type of respondents that you're actually talking to. You should use as much as ordinary words so that there is no misinterpretation. Don't use ambiguous words. So use unambiguous words. Never, occasionally, sometimes, often. These are very confusing. What is occasionally? Supposing occasionally drinking soft drink. For somebody, occasionally drinking soft drink would be once a week, but for somebody it could be once a month, right? So terms which are very confusing should not be used, wherein it can cause wrong kind of inputs coming in. Avoid leading question. Don't ask questions wherein the answer is typically almost coming in and you know that it is going to be the response that you want them to answer. Like, for example, do you think patriotic Americans or even Indians should buy imported automobiles, when that would put American labor out of work? As if saying that no, you have to say that no, they should not buy. But the other way could be that, do you think Americans should buy imported automobiles? Yes or no? All right, so all of this can be done. The other thing is, when you are asking questions, ask questions like, for example, the incorrect form is, do you like to fly when traveling short distances? You should ask something like, for example, do you like to fly when traveling short distances, or would you rather drive? So if you say, do you like to fly, it's like yes or no. But are you trying to talk about some other options? So ensure that you ask the questions also in an appropriate manner, so that they are able to answer also in a similar way, and questions or the wordings are not confusing. Avoid implicit assumptions. For example, are you in favor of a balanced budget? All right, but you can ask the question correctly in a little bit elaborate manner. Are you in favor of a balanced budget if it would result in an increase in the personal income tax? So why balanced budget? So first question, which is given example, is an incorrect form. If you elaborate it, it becomes a little more correct, because it provides a little bit of more understanding to people. Question wording. What you see on the first sentence, it is an incorrect. What is the annual per capita expenditure on groceries in your household? Annual per capita, so per head. Annual is very difficult for people to recall, but if you ask that same question, what is a monthly or weekly expenditure on groceries in your household, it is a little better. And then you can ask how many members are there in your household. So what you do is that you divide the first one, the monthly expenditure divided by the number of people, it will give you the per capita. So understand that questions that you may think, or words which you may think is understandable, may not always be very much understandable and relatable to respondents when they are asked to answer. All right. So again, when you are choosing statements, you must ensure that the statements are having either a positive or a negative connotation and not to confuse the customers. So once you develop the questionnaire, then I will go on to the coding of a questionnaire later. So first would be to develop a questionnaire. So all this you'll need to remember, and we still have about, I think, 2-3 minutes before 10 o'clock. We will take a break at 10 o'clock. So before that, I will show you certain sites. When you come back from the break, we will use the same assignment that we had used for one of the previous classes where you did a handwritten questionnaire. All right. And right now, I will try and show you the site from which you can actually develop the questionnaires through your mobile phone, tab, or laptop. Okay. So let me just show you that website. I hope you can see the screen right now. So this is surveymonkey.com. You can note it down. You can open an account. It's free to open. Surveymonkey.com is like an international software where it actually deals with a lot of questionnaire making options. So you can open your account with a LinkedIn or any kind of Google, or you can just open a user account yourself. Once you do that, so try to do that today itself. And today meaning after the break, please open an account with surveymonkey.com. What you see on the screen here, I hope all of you can see that. You take a screenshot, it is better. It is the URL is also given. So you can open the account and you can use any device. If you can see on the screen where I'm putting the cursor, you can actually view it on desktop. You can view it on tablet, and you can view it on mobile. It's a globally accepted website which has different templates of doing this. For example, I'm showing you on the screen a customer satisfaction survey template. So you can make your own questions based on the templates that are already there. So there are a huge set of templates. For example, if I go back here, I have created it. I have an account here. So you can basically have different kinds of templates. All right. Say, for example, what you see on the screen here, different type of templates. Say you want to do some thing on coronavirus leadership checking, there's a template. Customer satisfaction survey template, employee engagement survey template, product concept, net promoter score. This is again drawn from the theory of the customer referrals, customer advocacy. All right, loyalty and all. Software app feedback, all of these various website feedback template. You want to do a feedback survey for websites, working from home, general event, meeting feedback, volunteer, any type of thing. So you need to click. If you can observe on the screen here, you will have to click on surveymonkey.com. After creating a user ID and login credentials, everyone can create a user ID and login credentials free of cost. And you can do so. Once you do so, you get into the main screen here. You can do, for example, customer feedback. If you want to find out, you want to do a survey on customer satisfaction, there are many templates to choose from. Okay, how likely is it that you would recommend this company to a friend or colleague? See this question again. Second question, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you? Options are given here. So this is again an interval scale, all right, with options varying from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. See the second one. So the scale items that are being used is actually for a particular type of topic. All right. So third sample, which of the following words would you like to describe, would you use to describe our products? Select all that is applicable. So you can have multiple choice. reliable, high quality, unique, good for value for money, or unreliable, poor quality, ineffective. All right. And if you see, is it a balance scale? It is a balance scale because you have 5 of one type, positive sentiment, and 5 on the right side, which are of negative sentiment. All right. So you can choose that. And so many things, so many of these options are there. So I have put in the LMS, the assignment question, and I'll reload it right now. And once you're back from the break, we will deal with the actual set of making the questions using, perhaps you can even directly use Google Forms or SurveyMonkey to do it. We will get some 30 minutes to develop it. And once you do that, we will take the link. All right. And till the next class, you will collect the data. Next class, we're going to look at how you're going to code that data and use the data for going into multivariate analysis. All right. So students, you can take a 7 minutes break is sufficient between now, and then we are going to come back to the same class. We will continue after this short 5-7 minutes break. We will continue, and we have a class. We have a double class today. So we are going to continue back with the assignment till about 11. All right, I think you can remain logged in, or how do? You can come back if your network is not permitting. I'm just keeping the screen on like this. Hi, welcome back. So I had put this questionnaire assignment to all of you, and I hope you can see that. So what you can do is in your groups that you have, even if you're not able to coordinate with your groups, it is a very good activity to do this on your own also. All right, you choose one particular research problem. So many of you had chosen in the last class, it was research problem first. Attitude or perception among young people regarding social media platforms. So if that is the one that you have chosen, you don't need to stick to the same topic that you chose the last time. All right, so take about half an hour time. So we have about 45 minutes to go. So you can have about half an hour of time. You can directly go to the surveymonkey.com website that I told you right now, and you can start designing it there itself. Individually, you can start doing it. You don't even have to work out in a group. Later in a group, you can decide if you want to have some of the question. Otherwise, if you can have some kind of coordination, you can do that. Because breakout rooms we can do a random one, but if I have to do it with respect to your particular set of the groups that you have, 20 groups and all, it might become difficult. All right, at the same time, each one of you must become expert in developing the questionnaire. So I suggest that while it is good to do certain work in a group, it is also better to also practice it on your own. All right, so choose any one of the problems and develop it. So individually, all of you individually, that is each on your own, you choose any one problem is my suggestion. Develop the question. Okay, say about 10 questions only you keep for yourself, and start doing it in Google Forms or surveymonkey.com. Use your mobile or tablet or computer or laptop, whatever it is that you have, and you anyway have the internet connection also. All right, check out the surveymonkey.com. Take a screenshot of the assignment that I've given you here. It is also there on LMS. Check it out here. 10 questions. Just don't make more questions, and make the question in such a way that supposing it is the second problem. So it is like you want to find out the perception and attitude of people regarding their organization. All right. You are making a sample questionnaire. So assuming that you have to give it to any of your faculty members, or supposing you want to give it to any of your friends who are working in an organization, or you want to give it to any of your, say seniors, okay, people who are working already. So research problem 2 is like that. So develop some 10 questions for that. How they feel, what they like, what they don't like, how satisfied they are, whatever it is that you feel like. Third problem would be, research problem is finding out the perception and attitude of investors towards various investment options. Supposing you want to find out, people who invest, say they are investing in, what should I say, fixed deposits, they are investing in insurance, they're investing in mutual funds. Finding about their perception and attitude. Please remember, all these 3 questions are basically about finding out people's perception and attitude. These similar things are only about attitude. The object is different. The first research problem is about some social media platform, right? Wherein you can choose combination of Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, all of that, or you choose only one platform that you like, and about that you ask anything. The second research problem is basically about the same attitude, perception, and all that, but about an organization, employees towards their organization. All right. Third research problem, perception and attitude related measurement only, but investors towards certain investment option. All right. So you can take a combination of life insurance, health insurance, fixed deposits, stock market investments, mutual funds, all of that, or any particular type. But develop 10 questions as if you're asking a potential or an investor about how or what they feel about these investment options. All right. So my point is that instead of doing it on pen and paper, try and do it immediately on Google Forms or surveymonkey.com. The purpose is because after you do this questionnaire, you're going to use the next 4-5 days or 7 days. Typically, we'll have a class on Monday. So today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 4 days you will collect about 30 responses on your questionnaire. And then you will come back on Monday. I will let you know how you're going to use those things to prepare yourself to start doing analysis. Of course, I will have some case studies also, but it is always better that you do a sample questionnaire yourself. Each one of you do a sample questionnaire yourself, collect the data through the e-forms. You can't go to people right now because of the pandemic and all that. Better to send the link of that Survey Monkey or Google Forms. You send the link, like how we did the quiz. That link will be sent. The moment the link is sent, people will answer. So you can just give it to anybody, okay, depending on the type of thing. So you get it, around 30 responses you get. Then I will show you, you will get all this dump in the Excel sheet or Google sheet, and how you're going to use that for analysis. So first things first today. So no lectures right now, work on the assignment given. I am very much here. Anything that you need, help, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. Please start off. And by 10:45, 10:50, you must upload the link of your questionnaire in LMS. Please upload the link in your LMS, in the LMS login ID, user ID to my subject. Any kind of doubt, please ask me. So surveymonkey.com, any doubt is there? I am putting the link also in the chat box here. So please have a look at the chat box of Zoom meeting itself right now. I have sent you the link. Please have a user ID, password created. And please understand, this is a practical thing. I don't want to give PPT presentation on how to do the question in surveymonkey.com. It's all about hands-on exercise. If you don't do hands-on exercise, students, you will not become comfortable in making a questionnaire. All right. And also what happens is there's so many templates given in the portal, right? You will be able to understand, you will be able to also think and contemplate what kind of questions should I really use for which type of question. So you get so much of options which are already there. So hands-on exercise is always a better option in order to, it's like building the skill, right? Tomorrow, out of this subject, you should feel comfortable that if I am told to make any kind of questionnaire for my, research work, or I have to do an internship and there I need to do research. First, what are the steps? How should I proceed? All of that. Okay. And if you do the questions also, you will see later, once you collect the answers to these questions on Google Forms, you will get an automatic analysis, basic descriptive analysis you will get. Even on SurveyMonkey also, you will be able to do that. Let me know if you have a doubt. I'm still here. I'm very much going to be here What is the status of the completion? Section A, group 1. Section B, group 1. Are you working on that? You are taking the, I think you guys have taken the screenshot also, right? Screenshot of the assignment.
Yes, ma'am.
Just 10 questions, huh? 10 questions you have to make. I have also enabled the LMS to accept the submission from each one of you. So prepare it. Are you using, how many of you are using Google Forms? Who is using Google Forms? Survey and surveymonkey.com, which one you're using?
Ma'am, I am using Google Form, ma'am.
Okay, Pooja. Okay, right.
Ma'am, I'm also using Google Forms.
Who's this, please?
I'm Sana, ma'am.
Okay, Sana. Okay, fine. Anybody using Google, surveymonkey.com?
This Pranita and we are using SurveyMonkey.
SurveyMonkey, okay. Finding it useful?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Templates are nice.
Yeah. All right. So in fact, it can be also this way, you know, that once you can keep working, I'll keep just sharing my inputs. Those of you who are using, say, SurveyMonkey now, later you can also try and see usage or making it in Google Forms. Similar manner, those of you who are using Google Forms now, later you can also try and see what is the availability, what are the features in SurveyMonkey for the same thing. So it will give you an idea. So ideally right now you choose any one platform and make the questionnaire. But my suggestion would be that you should have familiarity with both. So it's good that you have made a choice, either choosing Google Forms or surveymonkey.com. So the one which you're using right now, after that is done, later try the same set, try to do the same thing on the other platform. Just 10 questions, huh? Don't make it very exhaustive. Also, while you're making the questionnaire, kindly make sure that some demographic information you're able to collect, at least a name. Okay, because think a little bit ahead, like we discussed when we were discussing about questionnaire building or collecting data. You need to think about a little ahead into what kind of analysis you're planning to do. Okay, like would you like to find out age wise their perception and all that, age group wise? All right, so in this case I think when you're collecting ages, do you really think you need to collect exact age, or do you want to make it like a nominal scale, 8 like different categories of age? So some of the things, like some people use below 18 to 25, 26 to 30. So one question perhaps can be on that. Maybe gender wise also you want to see the perception and preferences of people who are answering the different research problems. Say one for social media, if you're choosing, again you might want to know, right, gender wise. So think a little bit on that perspective also. So research problem, the 3 context which is given to all of you is given so that you start thinking on your own, like in what way do you want to really get the inputs. Okay, so demographic, age, gender, income wise, you may not have so much to do with household income for social media platform, but perhaps people who are choosing research problem 3, All right, research problem 3, if you see on the screen, then perhaps maybe household income, annual household income, monthly household income. So again, annual household income might be difficult for people to recall and all. Maybe monthly household income is a easy to recall kind of a thing. And because the third research problem in the assignment is to do with investment options. So perhaps you can look at, how household income wise the attitude and perception is prevailing or is varying between different income groups. All right. You can also ask, for example, the marital status. So investor groups, when you're studying for research problem 3, perhaps the marital status, whether they're married or not, family size is important. But say for research problem 1, when you're asking about, or you want to find out about attitude and perception of people to our social media platforms, maybe, age and, the family size and monthly household income may not become very relevant. All right. So that is kind of, again, say research problem 2, if you look at, perhaps some 1 or 2 questions can be there about what is the level in which the person is working in the company. Okay, if not the designation, if it is a junior management, middle management, or senior management level. So ask these kind of questions so that you can perhaps also, when you're doing the analysis, think about, are there differences in the perception of employees depending on the levels in which they are working? All right, so these are some of the tips I'm giving you. You can of course think of some more. And because I said you restrict it to 10 questions because you want to make it online. So first priority is for you to think about the questions per se, question content, wording, all right, the format. And within 10 questions, you want to restrict the questionnaire, right? So that's the first priority. The second thing that you want to do in this assignment is that you have to get it ready to submit it through either Google Forms or surveymonkey.com, which means you'll need some time to also make that template ready with the 10 questions. And the template should be ready how? Like, for example, link, like I sent you a link for the quiz, all of you I sent, right, day before yesterday. So it should be ready in the form of a link. So that link, if you send it to me, for example, I should be able to use that link, open the questionnaire and answer, right? For example, any of the students, even if you're doing research problem 1 or research problem 2 or research problem 3, you could send any of these links to me, right? I could answer research problem 1 questionnaire on social media platforms. I could answer second questionnaire also, employees' perception towards the organization. I could also answer this third research problem related questionnaire, as an investor, my attitude and perception towards different investment products and all that options, right? So ultimately, the purpose is, the outcome is, it is already 10:37. The outcome should be that you should be able to send across a link of the questionnaire. The link which if you send on email, you send on WhatsApp, you send by SMS, or you send by chat or anything, that link will enable someone, your intended respondent, to open your questionnaire and answer. Any doubts you have, you let me know.
आज ऐड आया है ना
हम्म?
ऐड आया तो टीम मैनेजमेंट दे आस्क फॉर इट
I have sent across on the LMS the assignment. I have sent across students. I have sent across the assignment. You can start uploading the questionnaire link. All right, surveymonkey.com questionnaire. Please start uploading it on
Who
the
is that
LMS.
Sorry.
Once again. So whatever you have developed on surveymonkey.com, please send the link only. If you have developed it in Google Forms, please send it. Each one of you, this will be individual. So please send it across. Later, across all the groups, we will compile the data collection and analysis later. And I will subsequently let you all know. You have to download now for the next set of classes, SPSS. All right. So 10 questions. Please finish it and upload the links on LMS quickly before you complete. It's hardly another 10 minutes left. Hardly 10 minutes left. Just upload your links. Okay. Don't upload Word format, this thing. We don't want Word files. We don't want handwritten files. We want you to upload link. I want you to upload the links. Google Forms link or surveymonkey.com, the questionnaire you created, the link kindly. I have released the opening of the assignment. You can start submitting the links. All right. And one more thing I'm doing is I'm also keeping the assignment open that each one of you can submit 2 links. Each one of you can submit 2 links. You know,
Ma'am, I'm done with my questionnaire, but ma'am, how to make all the question important?
is there any doubt you have? Because another 10 minutes, I think you should be able to start uploading. If there's any doubt, let me know so that I can clarify it. I will also have a look at the questionnaires once you send the link to me. And if there is any kind of input to be given, I will also talk to you. So what you also need to do once you are submitting the links, because you are already working on the questionnaire, students, please make a note of this. Please administer this questionnaire to get around 30 responses. So it will all, your Google Forms questionnaire will already have a sheet in which you will be able to collect the responses. So when you are giving it out, ensure that you are able to give it to about 30 people to answer, get those responses, and we are going to work on those responses on Monday. Monday onwards, I will show you how you will open that Excel sheet and what you're going to do with that. And I will start highlighting about the multivariate statistical techniques and what are the preliminaries that are there. I had uploaded on my website also some of the basic videos, instructional videos about how to enter data into the Excel, into SPSS files from a questionnaire collected data. So do have a look at those videos also. And when we come back in the next class on Monday, we will look at how we are going to use the data that has been collected in the questionnaire into that. So every one of you must be ready with the Excel sheet answers. That is Excel sheet which has the data from the questionnaires that you have administered. I would request you all to do this individually, because while it is good to do it in a group, it is important that each one of you develop the capability to understand how to formulate a questionnaire. All right, frame the questions, make it into an administrable format. That is currently, because of the current situation of the pandemic and all that, try to have an e-questionnaire, and that is also one of the most used form of administering questionnaires. And of course, if you have to make it into the form of a Word or a PDF later and have a printout, that is also possible. But an e-questionnaire enables you to circulate the questionnaire far and wide. Along with that, the Excel input of your data responses, each of you, when you have that with you, you will become familiar, and you will be able to practice, number one, coding of the data, which I will show you, coding of the data into Excel, subsequently exporting it into SPSS raw file, then using that in SPSS to run the different kinds of multivariate analysis. All right, so in your syllabus, we have those discriminant analysis and cluster and factor analysis. In addition to that, I will also be running the chi-square, regression, ANOVA, in order to show you the linkages, because these are some of the most used analytical techniques for quantitative research that we use to derive interpretation. All right, but first is important is you collect the data from the questionnaire that you have developed and use it. After that, while we are doing that, in addition to that, I have several data files, all right, Excel data files, which are different data that has been collected, which again, I have put it on my website, which I will also subsequently put it in the LMS. So those data files also you can use subsequently to do the practice of coding it into different, for different kinds of analysis. All right, so kindly start putting in. I think we have about 10 minutes. I will now leave you all to, you can log out of Zoom and go back to LMS, start uploading the links and start sharing that link with 30 people to get the response. If there is any doubt, you can let me know on LMS also. Otherwise, I will meet you in the next class, which is on Monday. Any doubts? Okay, I think we don't have any kind of doubts. So please submit your links and please take care of yourself. We will end the session now. Any doubt, additional doubt later coming in, please message on LMS. Thank you so much.
Ma'am,
Thank you, ma'am.
I do have a
Thank
doubt.
you. Welcome.